The Sorcerer is a fantastic class for newcomers and Diablo 4 veterans alike. Their skills are easy to understand, deal great damage, and offer some form of utility that makes Sorcerers fantastic in a group. Arguably the most overlooked build archetype for Sorcerer is Ice, focusing on freezing targets and generating massive barriers to stay alive. Ice Shards in particular is a fantastic skill to build around as a Sorcerer, giving you access to some absurd single target DPS and clear speed all at once. So we're going to show you how to use the Ice Shards in a powerful build that will have you hitting level 50 and higher in no time. So let's start with the active skills to make this build really pop. First of all, for your basic skill, choose Frostbolt with the enhanced and glinting upgrades. Frostbolt is solely used for restoring your mana through its glinting augment. The skill itself is rather mediocre otherwise. For your core skill, we're going to pick up the centerpiece of this build, Ice Shards, and try to pick up enhanced and the greater upgrades as well, because Ice Shards is the star of the show for this build. It has solid single target damage since each shard deals 35% weapon damage per shard, but we can turn this into an AoE skill quite easily. Enhanced Ice Shards gives this skill a chance to ricochet when hitting a target, and if they're frozen, it always ricochets. We then take Greater Ice Shards so enemies count as frozen when you have a barrier, which means your Ice Shards always ricochet and deal 25% more damage. If you pair this effect with the Ice Shards Pierce legendary affix, your Ice Shards will duplicate when you have a barrier, and this makes Ice Shards arguably the best add clear skill for Sorcerers. And while leveling, it might be a good idea to pair this with Frozen Orb. You'll want to use this in your second enchantment slot once it's unlocked at level 30, as it will auto cast this skill on occasion. The next skill for this build is Flame Shield with enhanced and shimmering upgrades. Flame Shield is a panic button for when things go wrong. Cast this to break out of CC effects and become invincible for a couple of seconds, and with the enhanced and shimmering upgrades, it'll buff your movement speed and restore HP when you use it. The next skill we'll pick for this build is Teleport with enhanced and shimmering upgrades. Teleport is a staple of all Sorcerer builds. It makes leveling much faster, gives you a CC cleanse, and lets you travel over obstacles and uneven terrain. You'll also want to pick up Frost Nova with the enhanced and mystical upgrades. Frost Nova is your main source of vulnerability against bosses. We use its enhanced and mystical augments to make this skill inflict invulnerability on all frozen targets, greatly buffing our single target DPS against bosses. And it's a good idea to put spare skill points into this skill to reduce its cooldown. You could also consider Ice Armor. It's great for leveling since it makes all of your damage generate barrier, making Ice Shards always ricochet. When it comes to passives, you'll want to take as many cold passives as you can, maxing out all of them except Icy Veil, since barrier duration is hardly noticeable. We've seen some huge damage increases thanks to Permafrost, Hoarfrost and Icy Touch. Mana sustain is one of the biggest issues with this build, but you can fix that by taking Frigid Breeze. This gives Ice Shards a chance of restoring mana when they hit vulnerable targets. Each hit of Ice Shards can also activate this passive, provided the base skill rolled a lucky hit. You can pair this with Avalanche for the occasional free Ice Shards cast. Beyond that, we highly recommend grabbing the Cold Front and Snap Freeze passives to buff your chance of chilling and freezing targets. These conditions can cause freeze with a high degree of consistency, providing vulnerability in the process. This will then trigger all the damage passives that we mentioned earlier. It's also worth grabbing Precision Magic to buff your lucky hit chance, Glass Cannon for more damage, and put 1 point in Elemental Attunement for free cooldown resets on your defensive skills. And for a full breakdown of the best gear and aspects for this build, make sure to check out the original guide that's linked in the description. So let's talk about leveling up this build, and while we recommended mainly ice spells earlier, you might want to use Chain Lightning and Arc Lash for the first few levels, as these skills have aggressive damage scaling compared to your other options, investing points into Chain Lightning itself to increase your damage. Around level 15, you'll get a Sorcerer quest that unlocks the enchantment system, so finish that quickly and socket Fireball into your first socket. You can swap to Ice Shards now if Chain Lightning starts to feel weak, and grabbing Ice Armor and Frost Nova to generate barrier and vulnerability respectively. You may also want to grab the Protection passive in the Conjuration section, as this passive grants a barrier whenever you use a cooldown skill. Level 30 is when you'll unlock your second enchantment slot. You can socket Frozen Orb, Ice Shards or Blizzard depending on your setup. In our pre-release playthrough, Frozen Orb was very effective, and you'll want to grab the Frigid Breeze node near the ultimate section and put points into Precision Magic and Conjuration. This will cause Ice Shards to occasionally restore your mana, and grab Avalanche once you hit level 35. At this point you want to flesh out your tree by grabbing all the cold passives, investing points into Ice Shards and Frost Nova, and equipping useful legendary affixes. Keep an eye out for the Piercing Frost aspect when leveling, as this one is a game changer for Ice Shard's clear speed, and if mana is becoming an issue, clear the Witchwater dungeon in Hawazar to unlock the Prodigies aspect. This will restore mana whenever you use a defensive skill, effectively half of your skill bar. So there's our guide on the best build to level up a Sorcerer in Diablo 4. I've been Luke Gould, thanks for watching, and check out thegamer.com for more.